Welcome to our webinar. Thank you for joining us today. We see there is a great turnout. It must be the holidays time. This is Angela Lopez with Cowles Thompson. I'm a shareholder and I have been practicing immigration law exclusively for over 16 years. With me today is attorney Michelle Alonzo.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm also an associate here with Cowles Thompson, practicing exclusively in immigration law as well.
Yes. Our webinar today is going to be an update on the immigration, I would say, evolution or progress or changes in 2017. We're just going to give you kind of a summary of the major changes or updates as to where we are in the different programs. Just a couple housekeeping items, please. Mute your phones. We will take questions at the end of the program, and we will be happy to answer questions. However, during the program, you can type your question on the pane, and we will try to address the question as we do the presentation. Also, please remember that this is a live webinar. So you can raise your hand at any time and let us know if sound is not good, if the slides we're having issues with, technology is good, but sometimes it doesn't work in our favor. So just to start, today we're going to go over the President Trump's 10-point plan. Remember, the first time we did this webinar last December, right after the elections, we talked about the 10-point plan, what he had in mind in terms of immigration. So we're going to go and walk you through the 10 points just to see which of the goals that he had in mind has been accomplished or which one are in the works. We will talk about the DACA because that's in everybody's mind. There is an announcement for foreign physicians or for our clients, and this is regarding the travel ban. Because there are concerns about what visas will be issued, which ones will not. And then we'll talk about what we believe might be happening next year so we can all kind of prepare ahead of time.
What we're speculating.
Yes. So let's start with our first point.
So we remember, against the backdrop of this 10-point plan, the first point was to begin working on the wall. We were talking about the U.S.-Mexico, the southwestern wall, and there was a lot of tout about Mexico paying for it. So in July 2017, we started hearing from President Trump via tweet, as he's famous for, that we're looking at about 700 to 900. It's not going to stretch the entire border. He explained that there's other existing barriers there, and actually, we haven't heard anything about Mexico paying for the wall anymore. If anything, we've seen him actually push this onto Congress, saying, where are we going to get funding?
Yes, actually, and this is curious or a coincidence, because last night I was watching the news, which I these days do rarely because I really don't like news, period.
It's a little depressing.
It is. So I get my news through other sources. But I was watching the news, and they were interviewing the new Homeland Security secretary, and she was saying, and she's only been in office for a couple of weeks, but she was saying how she's already working on getting the wall built, and she has funding to start.
Oh,
I don't know how far along she's going to be able to get that done, but she's also talking about the other measures that she plans on implementing for Homeland Security to make sure we're safe.
Right, and I think that's probably against about the backdrop of the fact that they did already green light several companies to build the prototypes, and if you were watching the news, you saw that these different prototypes were presented. So the wall is still a thing. It's still obviously very much a priority. So it's going to be interesting to see how this ultimately gets funded and just what it's going to look like in the end. Lots of stuff happening there.
Second, the catch and release.
This was a big one. He wanted to end catch and release anyone who illegally crosses the border to be detained until they're removed out of the country. Now, logistically, this is a nightmare because that means anybody that's apprehended needs to be held. And it's interesting because just this past October, Attorney General Jeff Sessions was very critical of it. And he was, and here's a couple of quotes from him. He said, "It's not the policy, it's the reality. Catch and release is going on despite the promises to end the practice." What's happening is when people are getting presented at the border, they're being processed, fingerprinted, and then they're being released and told, you'll come back at a future date for your hearing, and they're just not, according to the Attorney General, showing up for their appointments for their hearings.
This is a reality. It's not just according to Attorney General. We know for a fact that, yes, people are released to appear on a later date, and most of them don't appear, or they don't.
That's what he's saying.
Well, the numbers show it, and so that's a concern, and that's something they are trying to be done with.
To be fair, I think it's logistically a nightmare to think that anybody you catch, you're definitely going to have to house. That's going to be a bunch of
good faith. Good faith matters.
Well, and what was interesting about this particular, when we were researching and putting this together, this was also the same time that the Attorney General said that there was loopholes that advocates were encouraging these foreign nationals to take, which I don't think is fair. Advocates are warning that changes to this sort of process is going to put in and really shut down protections that are already built in for legitimate refugees and asylum seekers. Are there those who take advantage of the system? Absolutely, but in kind of shutting it down, you'll be leaving the people who qualify out, which I think is a major concern.
Yes. So the third one is move criminal aliens out on day one. Okay, so what they were looking at, this has been a fight between the federal government and local and state governments, because what the federal government is looking for is that the state government and along with the local governments cooperate with federal agents or agencies to apprehend and deport aliens or foreign nationals that have criminal records, or that when they are arrested for any specific violation of the law, that they are reported to the Department of Immigration so they can start the deportation process. As we all know, this goes back to the sanctuary cities and why local and state governments don't feel this is a fair practice, specifically because of the finance or the money that represents for these local or state communities to finance these operations, and the government is asking for cooperation but not necessarily funding the local or state governments to help. So it's a fight. And different opinions, different takes. So what we are seeing is that ICE, according to the statistics.
Yes, we actually have statistics, yes, on this one.
Yes, on this one. Okay, so they say that between January 22nd this year and April 29th, they had 30,473 people that were convicted criminals.
Right.
This compared to last year during January to April was an increase because we had only 25,786.
Of these convicted of them, the 2,700 of them were violent crimes. And then but what also went up, which was very remarkable, was the arrest of non-criminals. So that seems to kind of take away the focus of this point. We were going to focus on criminal aliens, and I think it's interesting, and we should bring it up. The policy that was in place under the previous administration, under President Barack Obama, was one that did have a tiered priority and really putting a priority on criminal aliens. So I've always been confused by this point. There's always been an emphasis on basically focusing resources to remove criminal aliens. And so this is obviously a continued practice of focusing on criminal aliens and not necessarily a departure from the previous administration.
And I just think that this speaks for the fact that under this new president, they broaden the type of immigrants or aliens that they are going after for deportation.
Right.
It's not just, yes, they focus on criminal aliens, but they also open it up for anyone who might represent a threat to national security.
That's
and
a
that
really
might include,
broad umbrella.
Exactly. So also they include the ones who have deportation orders.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were in the system because you had a deportation order, whether you had a criminal record or not, then they are also targeting this population. So I think that that's what causes the increase in numbers. In addition, and as we always know, sometimes people who had no criminal records, but they may have been stopped for a traffic violation, and from there they may end up on ICE custody or
right, because they end up in criminal custody for some reason, and then they end up in ICE custody.
Yeah, so that's how the numbers can easily be increased.
Right. There's a lot that can be said about that one.
Yeah.
But we'll move on. The big one, you touched on it earlier, Angela, the ending sanctuary cities. They're definitely moving on this one. They have a No Sanctuary for Criminals Act introduced and passed the House this past summer. This one's definitely moving along. I have a problem with sanctuary cities because that's really not a definition for a sanctuary city, and I've said it before. There is not a particular jurisdiction that I think you could point to that can say they have not complied 100%. Maybe there's been some off ones, but that's been a huge focus of this administration, and they're definitely trying to pass legislation to ensure that there will be 100% cooperation.
Yeah, but I just think that the big issue there is that you do have certain states and even certain counties or cities or towns that they do come and they are loud enough and they do confront the government and they tell them, no, we are not, because we're going to protect or we're not going to cooperate with you. And that creates a difficult atmosphere to work in. And so...
Okay, but as lawyers, there's a true respect for the law. And so that I don't agree with. Because it's like telling somebody the IRS can't come and get you. They can go anywhere and get you.
No, federal law is federal law,
law,
regardless of what their position is.
Right.
Whether they say we want to cooperate or not, the government can enforce federal laws anywhere in the land.
Right.
It's just that discussion and that, I don't know, it just doesn't help the situation at all. So along with this, what the government did was terminating, and they call it, and I hate this, but that's how it appears,
Yes, what's in quotations.
2 illegal executive amnesties. Well,
I'm with you, Angela. I disagree completely.
To me, it's maybe 2 programs, but 2 illegal executive amnesties, I kind of struggle with that term.
Illegal and amnesty, I don't agree with either.
Well, no. And amnesty can mean so many things, but the programs that they terminated were the DAPA, and again, DAPA never happened. If you recall, when the act came out, or when the program was about to launch, there was a lawsuit. It went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, this is unconstitutional, so it's not going to go. So it was never, ever, ever in effect. However, the president had to, formally terminate it?
Well, right. So what happened, and this is where Attorney General also said he didn't think it was defensible. So what happened was we had the threat of Texas Attorney General, great state of Texas, Ken Paxton, come back and say, because we were Texas was leading the litigation against DAPA, and said, if you don't rescind DAPA, we're also going to go after DACA. So DAPA was formally rescinded, and then DACA inevitably had to follow because the Attorney General said, I can't defend this. Obviously, 2 different opinions. Previous legal counsel, Attorney General, said this was completely legal. This one said no. This one's in office. They could rescind it, and they did.
Yeah, but bottom line, no more DACA. And that's what we all know. Sadly, we saw the last renewals that The program was allowed, people were allowed to file in October. That was the last time. October 5th was the deadline for people to file for renewals. Anyone who didn't apply for renewals, then they're out.
Right.
In practice, what we will see happening is maybe some DACAs will start expiring maybe at the end of this year, beginning of next year, depending as to whether or not people were able to file for those renewals. But for sure, the expirations will start happening in March.
Right.
After March 5th. So we're going to see the DACA authorizations to expire, which means many of these young people, all of them will gradually start be losing their work authorizations, meaning they won't be able to continue to work. They won't be able to continue to renew their driver's licenses, and we know how chaotic that's going to be unless Congress does the right thing between now and March 5th and do something to maybe temporarily remedy the situation or permanently fix for good. So every day we hear different things about Congress, where they are. There are several pieces of legislation.
Right, and if you're following the news right now, everything's about the tax plan. So immigration again is taken sort of to the back burner. We haven't seen a lot of movement. We have a little bit. We're going to discuss more about that a little further into the presentation, but it is definitely something that's worrisome.
Yes.
And in that same point, President Trump said that, he really focused on all immigration laws will be enforced, and this was the tripling of ICE agents. They're having a problem with hiring these agents. It was a difficult issue before, and we're going to see how that's going to kind of change.
Well, two factors play into hiring new agents. One is funding.
Right.
Because
where's the money?
They keep talking about we need more people, but we don't have more money.
Right.
And then second is the number of agents they want to hire. In reality, this is the federal government. To hire one person takes them months.
Yep.
Never mind thousands, which is what they want to hire. So we'll see how they're going to resolve that. What we are seeing in practice is that, yes, they are more actively pursuing and detaining and trying to implement the deportation orders, which is creating backlog and a little bit of delays and all sort of different petitions, and we'll talk about that
You're
next.
right. At fiscal year 2017, ICE arrested 143,470 people just on immigration violations. So that they're definitely keeping true to that point.
And this is year 2017.
Yeah, we've already started.
Of today,
yeah.
Exactly. So who knows by the end of the year how many more. So I think that the numbers are definitely going to be just increasing on a daily basis. Suspend the issuance of visa to any place where adequate screening cannot occur. This is the famous travel ban.
The multiple travel ban. You see travel. There is a proclamation. The president's September 24th presidential proclamation that is it got its blessing from the Supreme Court on December 4th. And we're going to kind of go into that a little bit, especially how it pertains to our foreign physicians. We've had several webinars in the past where we've gone and kind of picked apart this travel ban, so we're not going to spend this time.
No, and this is the purpose of this is just to give you a summary of what's going on and what has happened.
Exactly.
So with the travel ban, just quickly, there have been at least four proclamations. The last one on December 4th. And that's the one that the court already said, no, is good and it will be implemented.
Yep, it's within the power.
Exactly. So, actually, and December 4th was the court that came out and said this is good, but the ban was proclaimed on September 24, 2017. And basically...
They're definitely going to tout this one as a victory.
Yes. So... we'll talk about that one next. The seventh point that he is trying to change.
Right. He wanted to ensure there's a lot that happens when you're actually physically removing aliens who've been ordered removed, and especially if they're in custody. The government will take them to those countries. But the foreign government has to accept them. And we've had some pushback from a couple of countries, and those were finally sanctioned. So the Trump administration imposed visa sanctions against 4 countries that have repeatedly refused to take back their citizens who were convicted of crimes here in the U.S. and ordered deported. So they went through the criminal process and they went through the immigration removal process, and those are listed there: Cambodia, Eritrea, and Guinea and Sierra Leone. So they're keeping true to this promise.
Yeah, that is happening. So that is
definitely
a check for that one, check mark. Ensure that the biometric entry-exit visa tracking system is fully implemented.
Okay, I thought this one was interesting because there's actually been, in 1996, there was legislation that required this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So this has been something that's kind of been left dormant by at least 3 administrations. So you have this one sort of picking up the ball and wanting to run forward. When we were researching this, the fact is the technological advancements from several of the science communities, they're saying that, yes, it is the future, but we still have a long way to go, which is probably why it's been tabled. We did find a 2015 Homeland Security report that suggested that there's major physical infrastructure and logistical and operational hurdles to collect this type of data. You have artificial intelligence that's sort of creeping in now. So then how would biometric data work if we were doing iris, if they could duplicate that? This gets very crazy in a fun, nerdy kind of way, but...
And they had been working on the system for quite a few years. They had become more savvy, tech savvy. They are keeping records in a better, more consistent manner. So, and when you travel now, the latest, and it's happening in the last couple of years, that when you travel and you enter in the United States, then they take your fingerprint.
Yep.
You put your thumb on a little machine, and they read your fingerprints, and then all your data comes up. That didn't happen. That was not happening 5-6 years ago. Is something, but they are getting better in terms of updating the technology to keep track of who comes in and who lives.
Right, and so in February we saw that DHS's Department of Homeland Security's innovation program in Silicon Valley awarded nearly $1 million in grants to 5 companies that process biometric data, including Wi-Fi fingerprints to predict behavior. So there's interesting advancements, but seeing this happen probably within this administration, like to come to fruition, is just the technology's not there yet.
Yes,
but they're working on it. Number 9.
This is one we love because it really touches us in a special way. Turn off the jobs and benefits magnet.
Yes.
We've heard the politicians debate this point almost, as far as I can remember, ever since I started practicing immigration, they talk about this and how we bring all these people and they come here and they're taking the jobs.
Taking the jobs, and the employers that make all these nice and fun things so to attract more workers. So what they are proposing, and actually we have seen a lot of things going on, and we'll talk about that next, but they want to make the E-Verify system mandatory. If you're not familiar with the E-Verify, this is an electronic system. Employers in the United States, they are supposed to keep the I-9 forms to verify employment of people who are going to start a job. So every employee or every person that is going to start a new job that is going to be categorized as an employee must complete an I-9 form. And this is the law, has been the law for many, many, many years. And the E-Verify is an electronic system in which employers enter the information on the I-9. It doesn't replace the I-9. It's just an electronic system where once the data of the new employees enter, the system will tell the employer whether or not the person is authorized to work. As always, this is a computer-based or internet-based system, and there are mistakes. Yep.
People
and
have glitches, and it's better now, definitely, than it was at the beginning. But we still get those letters says no person is not authorized to work, and the person might be a U.S. citizen. So it's about just entering the right information documentation so the person can continue. But they want to make that program mandatory. It's not, in certain states, it's not like Texas. It is not mandatory. Other states are. Also, it is mandatory for certain occupations and certain, if you are a contractor with the federal government,
Right.
you
That's
have to do
have to.
E-Verify. So in 2018, I think that we will probably see more changes in this area. And they're trying to get these, and that goes back to the technology issue, because they need to update and upgrade their systems to be able to cover or make it mandatory.
Exactly.
Otherwise, the system will crash.
So we'll talk about this because we saw this point as maybe really launching more in 2018. So we'll touch on that.
And along the jobs and benefit management, we see the reform, the legal immigration to serve the best interest of America and its workers.
Right, the last point, and this one screams that executive order: Buy American, Hire American. When we first read that order, I know I read it and I just said, well, this is just a bunch of huff and puff. There's nothing really substantial in there. And then we started seeing changes in how our H-1Bs are being adjudicated, for example.
Yes. And that was just the framework.
Right, I think so.
It's just, here is what we want. How is it going to be implemented is a different thing. And
right.
So we've seen a lot of things, and we're going to talk about our predictions for next year. And then along those lines, we see one piece of legislation that was introduced in the summer, the RISE Act,
heavily endorsed by President Trump.
Yeah, so he loves it, and is to reform the immigration system to make it a point.
A complete scrap of what we got going on right now.
Similar to the one that is in effect in Canada. And that will really change the immigration system completely. Right. So, and one of the senators, and I don't remember which one, said that this bill was a good point to start a conversation.
Right.
Which means we're not going to see these passing anytime soon.
Despite the president's endorsement, despite the fact that that this is just really not getting support at the Hill.
Yes.
So that's what that came up. But you'll see the legal immigration. There's been a lot of focus on H-1B. So I think we're still going to see more changes.
Yes. So the only thing that really we're concerned with many things, and things change it on a daily basis from one day to the next. We're always, when the week ends, we kind of take a deep breath and then we start embrace ourselves for Monday because we know something new will come up. But the main concern for us is DACA, and we just hope that Congress does the right thing. Now, an update for foreign physicians. The travel ban. We heard, or we know.
Angela's the presidential proclamation.
Okay, the presidential proclamation. Thank you. Michelle reminds me of that every day. So the concern with this presidential proclamation is that visas will definitely be either delayed or denied.
Right.
In some cases. Meaning, if you are in the United States and you are from certain countries, what we're telling our clients is, no need to apply for a visa, stay here. As long as you're in the United States and you continue to renew your petitions and continue to be in a status, you don't need to go and apply for a visa from certain countries. This is not to add more panic, and it's not the common consensus or what we see people almost panicking because they are now thinking it's everywhere.
Yes.
And we get phone calls. I always give as example my country, Colombia, because that's the best one I can think of. So I'm going to Colombia for vacation, or I'm going to Colombia for a few weeks. What are the problems I might have to renew my visa? Okay. Other than the normal problems, the ones that we have always had, none. Because at least the last time I knew, Colombia is still not on the list of countries that they are targeting. So for all other countries that are not in this list, there should not be other than the normal processing delays. And yes, we have the additional administrative review that they have been doing for years. And if the person is selected for that, well then, sorry, you'll have to wait outside until the visa is granted. But with the presidential proclamation, they listed the countries that they are going to be very selective, what visas they are going to be granting and which ones not, whether there is a waiver to obtain a visa or whether there is an exemption. So the people from these countries, they need to check with an attorney, make sure, do I qualify for one of the exemptions? If not, do I qualify for a waiver? If not, then check out whether the visa that you will be applying for is one of those that they continue to grant. So just a couple things that you need to keep in mind for physicians. The Chad is one of the countries listed. J1 visas will continue to be issued. J1 and H1B visas, no problems there. They are suspending B1 and B2. Those are visitors and business visas. So for physicians that we work with, if you're going to Chad and you're going to apply for a J1 or H1B, no worries. You should be able to obtain one, except for the normal delays. And if you are selected for additional administrative review, well, then you'll be out of the United States for longer than expected.
Right.
Iran, they continue to be eligible to apply for J1 visas. What we've seen with J1 physicians is that pretty much the J1 visa will continue to be issued in every country that is listed, so we're not concerned on that. However, these are the countries that are targeted. So what we anticipate is that there's going to be delays.
Okay, so but for example, if I'm from Iran, but I already have my visa and I'm already here, can I extend my status and not necessarily renew my visa?
Yes, you can do that.
Exactly.
Now, the problem with Iran is that you might be able to get the J1 visa, but then for H1B visas and B2 and B1 visas, those have been suspended.
Right.
So if you are a physician and you obtain your J1 visa, you are here and you obtain later on a waiver if you needed one, and then you can change the status to H1B, but don't travel outside to get a visa stamp because you will be stuck out there.
Yeah, you won't get it issued.
You won't unless you qualify for an exemption or you can apply for a waiver. And the visa is suspended until they can ensure that there is a vetting system in place, that they know exactly who is coming in and for how long. So it's not suspended indefinitely. It's just suspended until they can do the vetting process. How long is that going to take? We don't know.
No.
And the more people in line waiting for visas, the longer the wait is going to be.
Right. And so no surprise here, though, North Korea, all visa issuance have been suspended.
Exactly.
Immigrant, non-immigrant, everything across the board.
J1s, no J1s, all visas suspended. So you don't, definitely, if you don't need to apply for a visa, stay in the United States. For Somalia, we see J1s. Visas will be granted in H1Bs and B1s and B2s. Syria, again, non-immigrant visas are suspended. All non-immigrant visas, same as North Korea.
Right.
Venezuela, they only suspended certain visas, the B visas, for certain government employees and their family members. So if you're not a government employee or you're not a family member of a government employee, you should not have problems obtaining a visa. In Yemen, eligible for J1s and H1B visas, but B1s and B2 are suspended. So we need to caution people to take a look at this list and make sure that if you're not sure whether or not you qualify for a waiver or an exemption, depending on the visa you're going to apply for, talk to an attorney, because you want to make sure that if you leave, you're not going to be stuck out there for indefinitely until you're able to come back, because it causes issues with employment, family. If you have small children, they need to go to school. If you have your job, then your employer may not be happy that they'll have to wait indefinitely until you come back. So keep in mind that suspension of visa issuance may be waived, and in some circumstances. The proclamation contains provisions, and they list specifically under what circumstances they will waive this restriction, and then they will issue the visa. Again, yes, they list the specific situations. However, remember, officers have some sort of
They have discretion.
And so in analyzing and looking at the evidence or the information provided, they have certain latitude in whether or not to grant the waiver.
Right, so I think the advice has been, if you're from any one of the listed 8 countries, either way you need to consult. We need to make sure the extensions and any visa issuance is properly addressed.
Because those waivers are just going to be granted on a case-by-case basis,
right,
which
just
means
because
nothing is for sure.
Right, nothing's certain.
Exactly. Okay, so what do we expect for next year?
Oh, wow. Okay, so I think when we were brainstorming and looking at everything, it just became very apparent that 2018, from what we can see, will be the year of enforcement. Thomas Homan is the ICE Deputy Director right now and Senior Official, and these are some statements that we pulled from him, and these have been repeated in one fashion or another by him in multiple forums. And basically he says we're going back to holding employers accountable. And he goes back, and in his choice words, it's about removing a magnet. And if you remember, that was one of the 10 points that was outlined by President Trump and the administration on their take for immigration. So this looks like a year of enforcement. And we just recently went and heard some government officials discussing worksite enforcement. And while they were very cordial and obviously didn't tell us, oh yeah, 2018, we're going to come knocking on a lot of people's doors, we kind of I got the sense that, yes, this is definitely going to be the year of enforcement. They were very clear they don't go after any particular industry, that the whole idea is that they want enforcement and they want compliance, and so it is very random.
Well, in some cases it's very random. Other cases they just have employees, disgruntled employees that complain, and they go and investigate. But it was interesting to hear these attorneys talk, because one of the things that I got from there is that, yes, they do random investigations, but they go to these cities that are closer to the south border or outside the metropolitan area, because I think that you might find employers more willing, or not even, I shouldn't even say willing, but the probabilities of finding people working with authorization in places that are not so close to the cities are higher than none. So they do go randomly to certain
they
places.
Go randomly to rural areas.
Yes, to rural areas, so they can, and they say that is very effective.
Well, and obviously, we see a lot of lobbying by certain industries to sort of ask them, or ask ICE or worksite enforcement to sort of back off. We see it in food and beverage and hospitality. I just don't know how those lobbying groups are going to manage in this administration. It's left to be told.
But enforcement goes to, we just mentioned that, I-9. Definitely people who have already been investigated, or that they have already received a visit from ICE in terms of the I-9, they can almost anticipate they'll be visited again.
Right.
So they want to make sure they are now following the law.
So in a year of enforcement, we want to make sure employers are 100% compliant. And that's on the employment side. I obviously think that we've seen enforcement on removal side definitely on the uptick, and I don't think that trend is going to slow down at all.
No, but the removal side is kind of a given. We expect that. We knew that is happening. But in 2018, I think that the difference is going to be in employment. they are going to be targeting more employers and companies to, like they said, remove the magnet.
Maybe that's why they're giving them a tax break. They can pay for
I'm
these
not going
fines.
to get there. So along those lines, so they will also, what can be expected is that there are going to be increased investigations from the U.S. Department of Justice.
Yep.
And the U.S. Department of Labor, Wage and Hour Divisions.
Right, and those are the two agencies that can also audit your I-9. So you could be visited by any one of those three agencies to look at that same form and your compliance.
So as we frequently say, and when every time we talk to employers, it is about compliance, compliance, compliance. It is never too late to implement an I-9 audit system and an I-9 compliance program. So if you're not sure, if you're in compliance and you're one of those employers that might be or may not, I mean, remember, it's randomly, so you never know who is going to be knocking at your door. This might be a good opportunity to take a look at your I-9s, who is doing them, how, when, whether they're stored in a proper place, and whether the rules are followed.
Right, and not even just your I-9s, also, do you have a system in place that if one of these agencies were to come to your office, do you have a policy in place of what the chain of command and chain of contact is to let them know, oh, by the way, we have a government official out here asking to review I-9s, where do I send them? So I think when we talk about a compliance plan, we're talking from beginning to end.
Yeah, so another area that we're going to be seeing is more site visits. And we see these particularly in the H-1B area.
Yep.
Site visits is, and we tell our clients, CIS or USCIS, they do have a unit that investigates fraud.
FDNS, yes.
FDNS, and they have been doing this for years. Again, we go back to, it's been done for years, but we believe in 2018, along the lines of removing the magnet and making sure that compliance is the priority. They will be visiting more people or more employers that sponsor H-1B visa aliens, and we have already kind of see what they're trying to do with the H-1Bs, and we'll talk about that next. But one of the things that we always stress is, along with the I-9 compliance, H-1Bs, they have compliance specific rules that when we prepare H-1B visas, we always give employers a packet for them to create their own program files in compliance with the H-1B rules. So this is a good opportunity to review and make sure that they have the files, that employers have the files needed to be kept in terms of the H-1B documentation, and make sure they are in compliance. Compliance doesn't only mean paperwork, but also if the employee is working where the employee is supposed to be working. H-1B is specific as to location and salary, whether they're paying the salary they're supposed to be paying.
And I think it's interesting because we're talking about 2018 speculatively here. With the requirement of interviews for employment-based adjustments, I feel like USCIS is going to have access to a lot of more information about these employers, and I feel like that may be sort of the information gathering that they'll be passing along to FDNS that might direct them to go visit certain employers. So the fact that they're requiring these adjustment interviews, I think is going to give them access to kind of tipping off to where they might want to look also. It's just, again, it's pure speculation, but there is this sort of enforcement bane that's kind of running through. And you make a good point. These mechanisms they're using to sort of uptick enforcement have always been there, and they've been functioning this entire time.
Mm-hmm. So along that line, we're going to also, or we expect to see more scrutiny. They will scrutinize certain petitions more than they used to. Like what? This is one of those things that we can't stop talking about, the H-1B visa, because it's one of the programs that is targeted and it's been in the news, it's been in the minds and in every conversation. Every time you hear jobs and employers, you hear about the H-1B program. So that's going to be an interesting program situation to watch and see how that's going to evolve. Along with that one, we have the L1.
Yep.
The L1, quite frankly, has been targeted for many years.
Yes, and I think through policy, through memorandum, and in terms of adjudications.
Yes, and it's good that you bring that up, because the other day we were talking to somebody, and from the news and from all the different things you hear on a daily basis regarding immigration, you would think that there are new laws coming out every day.
Right, and that's just not the case.
And it's not the case. What we're seeing is that they are making changes through policy, they are changing procedure, but they are changing so many things so rapidly that it's hard to keep up in many areas, including and specifically the H-1B and the L visas are being affected.
And that's a great point, because first of all, we would have to see some sort of change in law, and that just hasn't necessarily been the case. We are seeing a shift in how they are applying the law that exists, and that is what is really kind of keeping us as practitioners on our toes. Because you're right, I'm looking at a case, I'm thinking, let me make sure I know everything is up to date on this particular type of adjudication for this classification that we're seeking.
So one of the things we're doing is, when we prepare, just to give you an example, when we prepare an H-1B visa, we keep in mind all the different changes and all the different things that the Immigration Department has come up during this year. So we kind of include information and documentation according to what they had been asking for this year.
And that's important, because they did say they will not give deference anymore to previous approvals for H's and L's.
And that's okay, because every petition is on its own. But however, even taking those precautions, we can be 100% sure we're not going to get a request for additional information or evidence from the Department of Immigration, because we know they will be fine. They will find something, and then we'll have to go and revisit the whole thing. It's becoming very difficult to predict where they are going with this H-1B.
Clients love that, right? No,
yes.
It's equally frustrating.
What we are seeing, and we have to talk about H-1B visas, because they want to change the program based on Buy America.
That executive order.
Exactly.
And I think the lawsuits by a certain group of disgruntled employees are saying that no, there is a push to abuse the H-1B program, and we've seen abuses of the program in the past, but they've been handled through FDNS, and there's lawsuits that happen, debarment. It happens. Obviously this has become a pet peeve, and they really want to overhaul it.
Yes. So what it is difficult to practice in an area that we know they are intentionally making changes to discourage employers, and that's what I was trying to go to with this. What we saw this year is traditionally the Department of Immigration receives, in the last year, has received over 200 and some thousand H-1B petitions when the cap season starts. Well, this year they received less than 200,000.
I think it was 199,000.
And I believe next year they will probably receive less, because employers, and we already heard from some of our employers saying, we're not going to do this next year, because this year was kind of unexpected to see the volume of notices requesting additional documentation and information on these H-1B visas, specifically related to salary.
Right.
So for some, and there were quite a few denials.
Yes.
People are still fighting those cases.
Some victories. Quite a few.
This is a way to limit the H-1B program.
So if they were trying to discourage employers to utilize the H-1B program, I think that was definitely felt this fiscal year, and I think you're right. I think we'll see a reduction in filings for next year's cap.
So I just think that next year, for the employers, maybe this is a year where we need to be not necessarily stop sponsoring, but probably be a little bit more strategic in terms of what employees we're going to file visas for, and when and how.
Right.
Because they are making it more and more difficult for regular, normal day-and-day applications. So,
Right, but not just your H-1B employees. Also, this kind of goes back to enforcement because we've seen they're eliminating DACA, and so employment authorizations are going to start to expire. TPS, various countries, and those programs are going to start. They're going to be terminating those.
also, we see extreme vetting,
Right.
which limits the number of visas they're going to be granting outside the United States.
So this does sort of circles back around to I-9 because you want to make sure that your workforce is continuously compliant, that you're respecting those expiration dates on employment authorizations. It's going to be tough for employers this year.
Well, I would say maybe a little difficult. I don't know if it's tough because we can deal with tough.
You're so optimistic.
But we just need to strategize better.
That I agree
how to go about these petitions, how to file them, and for whom.
Right?
Because
I
if
agree.
an employer that is used to file 1,000 petitions, well, maybe they need to kind of
Scale it back.
not a scale back, but be more mindful of what are the petitions we really want to fight for.
Very true.
1,000 as opposed to 800 or 700, because there's going to be that element of we already saw this year, and next year is not going to be any easier. So be mindful of that.
With
Anything
that
else?
said, I think it's pretty clear that we're
living in interesting times.
right.
Okay, so thank you so much. We're going to open our lines for questions. Do we have any questions, Kelly?
Yes, we had a couple of questions about, is there any particular update for India for the upcoming year?
The question is there any particular update for India in 2018? So for India, and I talk to my clients that are from India frequently, India is not on the list, thanks God, of the latest presidential proclamation. So other than the usual delays, and keep in mind that there are delays in these agencies issuing visas. They are also, as I mentioned before, and they have been doing for years, the additional administrative review, and they are doing more of those.
Right. So I think
So that for India, you need to prepare that if you are selected for additional administrative review, then you need to be prepared to stay outside for as long as needed. We have experience where some of these administrative reviews might last a few days or a few weeks, and we have had cases where they last months.
up to 90 days.
I had a case once, and I think that's been probably the longest one that I had dealt with. I know other attorneys had worse experiences, but I had a client that had to stay outside for 9 months.
Wow.
Luckily, the employer waited for the employee to come back, but he was outside waiting for the visa for 9 months.
So I think we could say anecdotally, we have seen that administrative processing is a thing with the consulates in India.
But that's that's worldwide, anywhere.
I know,
but the question is specifically to India, so yes, be aware of that. Not to scare people or to say, no, don't go for a visa. No, other than that, the normal problems we had always had, we do not anticipate any changes in terms of the visa issuing.
Okay, great. I'm going to switch over to Q&A.
Q&A session has started.
Okay, so if you have questions, please press *6, and we will call your last 4 digits of your number so we can answer your questions.
And then while we wait for that, we also had a question about, are there any updates about H4-EADs?
Okay.
Oh, yes.
There's a question. The question was if there are any updates in terms of the H4 EAD or employment authorization document in the last few weeks. So we want to give you an update.
I think the news is that there's anticipation that it will be eliminated. But as of right now, nothing's changed. So
Well, I would say more than anticipation is a speculation.
it's speculation.
We really don't know. Here is what's going on with that. And we've done this before when we said there was a lawsuit that was filed back when the program was going to be implemented in 2015 by President Obama. And it's
It
still
continues.
going on.
It continues.
So right now, the lawsuit is at the appeal court, and the government had been asking for time to file an answer in terms of the lawsuit.
They
So
keep delaying it, Angela. They
they-
keep delaying it.
they first asked for 30 days, then they asked for 80 days, then they asked for 120 days, and at that point the court came out and said, well, really, no, we're not giving you any more extensions. By January 3rd, 2018, you have to file an answer.
So the practice advice that we've been giving everybody, if you qualify, file at the earliest opportunity that you can file because you're still eligible, nothing's changed.
Yes, so we know that by January 3rd, the government will have to file an answer, or some people they may not file any answer at all. If they don't file an answer, then the court will go by taking a look at what the other party is alleging to make a decision whether or not he will allow the lawsuit to continue. How is it the Court of Appeal? So they're not going to make a decision whether or not the program is terminated. As Michelle mentioned, the program is still in place. There hasn't been any suspensions of the program until this is resolved. People can continue to apply. And if the court decides to approve or to go along with what the other side is saying, that probably the case will go back to the court that is deciding. And if the government doesn't say anything, well, then maybe they'll make a decision. But it's not going to happen in January. In January, we'll know where the government stands on this,
Yes.
because they may very easily say, we agree with, with the lawsuit and this is going to be suspended, and then we'll go from there. But so what we are telling people is if you qualify for other programs, H-1Bs or green cards or other things, this might be a good time to start looking into it. Because if the program is suspended, and again, it's not going to be suspended from one day to the next.
Right.
But you will probably not have a lot of time to do something different. And at some point, the EAD will go away. The H-4 will continue to be in effect. That is
Right.
not going to be suspended. You will not lose status. But the employment authorization might be terminated. And then at that point, unless you qualify for other type of visa, employment-based visa, you might not be able to work. So there is where we are. So we'll be, stay tuned for January 3rd. We'll give you an update what the government said.
Any other questions, Kelly?
No, ma'am, that's it. for
Okay, and it looks like we don't have anybody phoning in. If you still want to ask us a question, please feel free to email us. We answer lots of questions after the webinars, and we'd be more than happy to address those as well.
Yes, you have our information on the screen. Just mention this webinar and your consultation will be free. Please call us with your questions or email us. We'll be happy to assist you, and thank you for being with us today. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and enjoy your
And Happy New Year.
festivities. And Happy New Year. We'll see you again in January.